Welcome to this special edition of Fleet Lead, your commercial vehicle podcast. I'm Kevin Jones, editorial director for our group, and that's FleetOwner, Fleet Maintenance, bulk transporter, refrigerated transporter, and trailer bodybuilders. For those who might not have heard, July 4 marks the 250 years of independence from British rule for the original 13 colonies. In honor of the occasion, the commercial vehicle titles here at Endeavor have some America 250 related content. And the gist is, where does trucking fit in the nation's history, and where are we going? With us today are Josh Visser and Jade Brasher from FleetOwner, and John Hitch and Lucas Roberto from Fleet Maintenance. So, welcome everyone. Someone has to go first, so I'm exercising my right as moderator to call on Jade to talk a little bit about the physical and technological evolution of freight. Jade, what about the history?
Yeah, let's get into it. America was founded based really on mercantilism, or economics, getting goods to another country, which would have been at this time, of course, Great Britain or England and France and Spain. So a lot of our infrastructure is built on the East Coast because of that. So if you look at a map of the United States, you can see where a lot of the interstates intersect on the East Coast. Also the same at night, if you look at a map of the U.S., you'll see a lot of lights all along the East Coast. That's because that's basically where America began to be built. And the reason why is because it allowed for very easy trade routes from the inland and tidewater regions out to flow through to the ocean. And that's kind of the basis of modern freight today, is those trade routes. Now, it didn't grow immediately overnight, obviously. There were centuries and centuries of things that had to happen for us to get to our modern interstates that we have today. But it's very interesting that if you overlay some of our really old roads or even our old trade routes from Native American trade routes onto some of the highways that we have today, they intersect and sometimes overlay almost perfectly. So it's really crazy how our past has really influenced our modern day times to the roads that we have today. That's basically in a nutshell. We can go way deeper if you want to, but I don't want to bore anyone too much.
Well, we can come back to you certainly, Jay, but now I'm going to jump to John real quick. John, you and Lucas had a lot of really interesting kind of twists on American Revolution and where we've been, timelines, geographical interests. Tell me a little bit about what you're taking away from America 250.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. So really, we've been thinking about this for over a year on how to celebrate America's 250th birthday. And, the premise is really simple for this. More than half of America's existence as a nation, trucks have been around for it. They've been around for about 127 years, technically, in America. And, in typical American fashion, we wanted to celebrate in as bombastic as a manner as possible, for our small but elite staff. So, big thing for our print and digital editions. If you open them, you'll notice that everything in them has to do with America. All the products are made in the USA, or most of the parts are. And just everything is about celebrating the history and, the companies and the people that made it happen. So one of the big things that we did is this timeline from about 1897 or so to now. Now, we didn't go into like the 2020s. We stopped kind of at 2020 or 2007 because the last 20 years, I think everyone kind of knows what's going on with the innovations there. But the thing we did start with is the creation of the first semi truck, which during my research I found out was created right here where I am in Cleveland, Ohio, by a Scottish immigrant named Alexander Winton. And, he comes over from Scotland when he's in his early 20s. He goes to New York, and by the 1880s, he's in Cleveland, starts a bicycle manufacturer, starts to motorize that. And by 1896, he has his own car. or, at that time, a motorless carriage. And he did some really amazing things, which, you can, I'm going to have another podcast on that if you want to get into the details. Uh, but it just really, the best thing about this was just finding all of the little human innovation stories. And just that's what I think, America is all about. Yes, it's about, how we were formed, and Jade really talked about that really well. But it's like the grit and the determination and the risks and the bravery and all of that. So hopefully all the stories we told kind of let that shine for the most part. And I will say one other thing. With America 250, we still wanted to talk about, maintenance stuff and trucking stuff. And so Lucas had a really good story on diagnostics regarding, 13 trouble codes, representing the 13 colonies. So I thought, Lucas, if you want to just talk a little bit about that real briefly.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when we started putting together the issue, I think we were looking for ways to tie the American history back to what our readers are dealing with every day. So this idea of the troublesome 13, the original 13 colonies, in short, were a diagnostic problem that the British had to solve, failed to solve, and today fleets face, their own warning signs in the form of these diagnostic trouble codes. So for the process for this article, I spent time talking with quite a few telematics providers, some diag experts, and some technicians about a lot of the fault codes that they see most often, but more importantly, the ones that consistently are leading to downtime. So this ended up being everything from after treatment and fuel system issues to a lot of sensor failures. But it was cool to see this fun historical hook become at its core really a story about recognizing problems before they become major catastrophic failures on the road.
All right,
Yeah,
very
don't
good.
don't ignore those Boston Tea Parties; they'll get you.
Uh, well, before we let Josh take a look at the future a little bit and where we're going, I just wanted to say there must have been something in the water in Ohio 125 years ago, John. I mean, wasn't there a bicycle shop guys in Dayton that kind of invented something that's turned out pretty well, like the airplane?
Well, yes, the Wright brothers, but that's also this is a funny thing because Lucas is in North Carolina and he talked to someone which we can get into about NASCAR and the creation of a lot of that industry down there. But the Wright brothers went from Ohio to North Carolina to actually take the first flight. But North Carolina and Ohio both kind of argue via their license plates who has it. And it's kind of funny with Alexander Whitten and the semi truck because I should have finished that story, so apologies. But he sells these cars. He's actually like the father of like automobile marketing too. Just there's so many amazing things that this guy did because he creates this car. He had like a prototype too that was a racer that could go 33 miles an hour. But he took the very first pretty much extended trip by a motorless carriage. He went from Cleveland to New York, and he was hoping that he gets there and it's going to be a big thing, and no one really cared at the time. So he went back and he's like, all right, I'm going to put an ad. He got an inventory of cars, I believe, and then he put out an ad in Scientific American, and then a guy from Pennsylvania saw the ad and was like, yeah, I'm going to go up there and literally kick the tires and, drive this thing around. And, he started selling these vehicles. Now, after that, he took a plain dealer reporter, the newspaper in Cleveland, from Cleveland to New York again. But this time they had the reporter file stories along the way. So everyone was following. And I believe the first one took like 9 days or something. And this one was a little shorter. The roads back then, if you can imagine, were not great. And, mostly horses and everything like that. So you got the horse droppings, you got nails because, and this is something I really didn't think about, but one of the curators at the Crawford Auto and Aviation Museum here that I talked to was just discussing how all of these nails from these horseshoes were just everywhere. So that was a problem with like if you had certain tires, they would just be busted up and stuff. So they had to navigate that. That reporter actually popularized the term from France, which is automobile. So first, recorded case of the use of automobile this trip, and caught a lot of attention, and really put cars in the public's consciousness. And so now he has these cars, but he can't ship them everywhere. He can't drive them because obviously once you take a car off the lot, it decreases in value, especially when you have horse crap and everything all over the place. So he decided to put a wagon on top of one of his cars, change the chassis a little bit, and boom, you got your first semi-tractor. And then Autocar in Pennsylvania at nearly the same time had kind of the same idea. So they were both pretty close, but Winton, we believe, has the edge. So he came first.
Well, at the risk of even mentioning tires, I won't. But Lucas, equal time wise, I know you've got a great podcast already about North Carolina. Anything you want to say to rebut John real quickly?
Not to rebut him, but the that North Carolina podcast, if I could talk about that for a second, was super cool to work on, especially because I am 7 minutes down the street from the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And North Carolina is a huge hub for both NASCAR, motorsports, and trucking, transportation. So I got to speak with Winston Kelly. He's the executive director of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And the goal was to explore how North Carolina's history with motorsports, trucking, and just a love for vehicles in general impacted today's broader trucking landscape. So there's a ton of parallels between the two in that he kept coming back to the fact that early racers weren't able to just go to the store and buy solutions. They had to build them. And that's a mindset that I think is still extremely relevant for our audience, whether you're working with a Class 8 truck or a race car. It's that innovation and attention to detail is always going to be important. The vehicle always has to perform, and reliability matters, whether it's speed for a race car, or with fleets it's efficiency, fuel economy, et cetera, et cetera. The stakes are going to be different, but the mindset of problem solving and continuous improvement is pretty similar in both industries. I think another one of the most interesting takeaways I had from that conversation was that there's sort of a sequence of events that came from the state's gearhead culture back in the day, inspiring early racers. It's a state that values engineering and technical skills, which helps attract educational programs, which helps attract kids who want to go to school around here, who are interested in that sort of thing and have a passion for working on vehicles, which in turn attracts manufacturers and suppliers like we've got Mack, Volvo, Daimler, technology companies like Norgon are all operating within the region. And it makes sense that they would want to position themselves near a high volume output of quality talent and technicians. And that goes back to a lot of the things that we talk about with recruitment and retention, a shortage of technicians. So that dynamic between the two and the sort of sequence of events was a really interesting takeaway from that conversation.
Well, that someone could look at a tractor trailer on the highway today and, from 125 years ago, oh yeah, well, that's a truck that hauls stuff. But there's a whole lot of technology now that is built into these new vehicles. Josh, kind of walk us into the future. How are things evolving and where are we going?
Yeah, I think to talk about the future too, we got to look back also because of the things that John and Jade and Lucas have talked about. It's like with each stage of innovation, Jade wrote about and talked about how originally we were moving goods through the U.S. and even before it was the U.S. on horse-drawn wagons that carried things, and they were able to go down regular trails that others walked on and used, and then as the motor came into effect, and then maybe we needed rubber for tires and those sorts of things, we needed to actually invest in the infrastructure that were roads to make sure that they could handle the weight that came with motorizing carriages so that they could actually carry more goods. And that then led to us having to, the first paved roads that existed way back when, which existed before the first motorized vehicles did, but then that grew and we needed more needs for that. And then that led to, as the semi truck took on and there was more powerful to carry more goods, well, wait, we need to find ways to fuel these things and create truck stops for the drivers to rest at and to refuel and to eat. And then that led to more and more needs, and eventually to the interstate highway system. After, like, John was talking about, that first semi truck concept struggled because the roads weren't good enough for it. And then in shortly before World War II, the U.S. and Eisenhower was I think a lieutenant in the U.S. Army at that time. They tried to see how long it would take to actually drive from the White House to San Francisco, and it took months because part of the ways they had to actually build bridges for vehicles to cross rivers, and they had to repair roads on the way. And then we fought in World War II, and Eisenhower got a look at what is now known as the Autobahn, which was not only a transportation structure and infrastructure in Germany, was also a defense infrastructure, so that the Germans could move defense equipment more quickly around the nation. And Eisenhower came back to the U.S. and said, we need to really develop this sort of infrastructure too, one, to move goods, but also for defense. And now you look 50 years ago, and you could kind of look at how trucking now, you're like, it's kind of stagnant. We still basically have 80,000 pound trucks that move goods. Things have not changed a lot as far as what a truck looks like. They're certainly more aerodynamic. The trailers are lighter. There's those sorts of things. But basically, if you think about when America was celebrating its bicentennial in 1976, the blueprint for hauling freight was, you need to run diesel engines with manual transmissions, and you needed good instincts for drivers. And then now, like, that is totally changing, and there's a lot going on that the average American, even a lot of people probably in the industry, don't even realize that what's changing. It's like the invisible infrastructure of, the software-defined vehicles and the telematics things and preventative maintenance, like those, like Lucas was talking about, that really has just become so much more important part of our industry. And right now, as we look into the future, it's building up that next modern future infrastructure, whether it be charging infrastructure for battery electric vehicles or biofuel infrastructure to reduce emissions, whether that be through like renewable diesels or renewable natural gas, maybe hydrogen, which is something we keep talking about, but I've yet to see it really like hang on because of the cost factor with that. But we're now like kind of just really moving into that next phase of American innovation. It's like every single time we come up with a new way or maybe a more efficient way to move freight, we then create new problems that need to be solved.
Well, actually, Josh, that kind of gets us to actual roundtable discussion coming up here, because I know that you and Jade and Jeremy, our producer, who's in the control room right now, so he's not speaking up, but y'all were all at ACT Expo, and ACT Expo has been, the hub of EVs for years. Things got a little quieter with the second time around with the Trump administration and taking away some of the supports. So let's talk a little bit about where are we going with EVs or alternative fuels? I mean, the last time there was a huge run up in diesel, alternative fuels were the big deal for 3 or 4 years. Who wants to jump in first with, are we getting to price parity at all with diesel or TCO? Can it pay without supports? What are we looking at?
I think it's getting closer, and I think it's a positive, the deregulation that has happened in Washington under Trump for the industry, because it's allowing manufacturers and suppliers to actually show the potential ROI and the TCO for these things, and it's less government incentives and more, so what's trucking about? It's about making money or keeping your costs down, depending on what type of operation you're running, whether it be a for hire fleet or a private fleet or a delivery fleet. And now, as we've taken a step back, and ACT Expo was definitely a lot different this year than it had been in years past. It was less all in on alternative power, whether it be battery electric or compressed natural gas or even hydrogen. And while that was still a big part of things that were discussed, it was also more about the automation that's going on, whether it be AI and helping shops do a better job of finding those fault codes before they actually light up the check engine light in the cab, or it's showing that, you know what, yeah, right now we can't do a BEV really that could travel cross country, although some companies like Tesla are saying that they're closer to making that actually happen. But you can adopt battery electric type vehicles for regional haul. It's worked really well in the yard with yard tractors, for example, and things that have short, dedicated routes that can charge on a regular basis. I think school buses are a great example, and while it doesn't necessarily fall within our purview as a commercial vehicle organization, they still show that that sort of concept works. These are things that go out and they make set stops. They have the same route that they run every single day, and they have 2 periods, the middle of the day and overnight, where they could recharge the vehicles and be ready for the next day. And also, that has the added benefit of, who doesn't want their kids to not be breathing in diesel exhaust fumes as they're getting on and off the bus? So we're seeing those sorts of things now, I think, get a better chance to develop and to win over maybe some skeptics within the industry, because I do think that going up into the 2020 election, it was assumed that we were going to be keeping all the same regulations, and it was kind of the EPA and the DOT and all the regulators were going to say, you have to do this, whether you like it or not. And now we're able to take a step back and say, prove to me what works and give me a reason to try this out. And if it does work, that's great. But the other thing could be too, is this gives an opportunity for biofuels to actually have their moment in the sun, because they were kind of left out, like natural gas and other sorts of biofuels were left out of those regulations. But you could, put renewable diesel in basically any sort of diesel running engine right now. And that has a lot of like even carbon neutral and carbon negative effects on the overall supply chain that were ignored before the Trump reset, so to speak.
Jade, I know you also do a lot of our medium duty work. Any takeaways there from ACT Expo, or anything else you wanted to add since you were there?
Yeah, some things that I heard at ACT Expo specifically toward medium duty were this, I would say, like an accelerated interest in natural gas engines, especially with the new Cummins engine that's out. That is designed for more heavy duty, but already some medium duty fleets have found a fit for natural gas. And I think it's the fact that it was proven in medium duty is kind of helping it accelerate into the heavy duty. But I will say that although there was more automation at ACT Expo and it hasn't been as EV heavy as in times past, there was plenty of alt fuel content, and that's my beat. So that's kind of what I was looking for. And I was busy the whole time. I had a lot to write about. I have a lot still yet to write about, specifically just from that show. But I do think that it's a very exciting time to be, I don't know if it's an exciting time to be part of the industry, but it's a very exciting time to cover the industry, because we're seeing how all of these fleets are experimenting or not experimenting because of XYZ. And then we can talk to them and understand, why is it that you are having a hard time with this powertrain? Why is it that you want to stick with this one? I mean, even going back to the beginning of the trucking industry, the beginning of vehicles, people used to purchase gallons of gasoline like off of a shelf at a general store. So there's always going to be some growing pains that you have to get through. There's going to be some infrastructure that has to be built. We're just at a time now where we have I don't want to say so much thrown at us, but we do have so many options, way more than we used to have as far as powertrain goes, as far as, how you want to operate your business, that I do see where it could be overwhelming from a fleet owner perspective of what do we want to focus on and what's going to give us the biggest ROI, because at the end of the day, that is the thing that matters, is the ROI. If you're hemorrhaging money on electric powertrains, but you can only carry half the load and you can only go half the distance, that's not going to be very beneficial for you. But for a fleet that has that baked into their operations, then yeah, maybe they should go for it. Same thing for natural gas. That's going to perform differently than diesel, and so on and so forth. But I think it's an exciting time that we're in right now. It's just how long is it going to be this exciting, and when is it going to start becoming more stable?
Kind of a pivot here, but related. Josh, you had mentioned Eisenhower and World War One, and pioneering the American road system. Well, 100 plus years ago in World War One is when the FET tax came along, and now instead of maybe arguably unpopular subsidies supporting EV adoption, the FET is actually making it harder because they're more expensive to buy the most efficient equipment. John, I know you had a story, about taxation with representation in fleet maintenance about the FET. There was a brilliant article, I thought. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I took a flyer on this new writer, Kevin Jones, who said he had some good ideas, because I've mentioned in the past that a lot of fleets were testifying to Congress, like, let's repeal this federal excise tax, because it was in response to being forced to buy electric vehicles. Now, an electric vehicle, because this FET is 12% tax, so 12% obviously on 300,000 is a lot more than it is on 150,000. So not only are you making them buy the chargers and the infrastructure and the training and all of that stuff, it's just, this FET was just one last extra kick by the government. So people were trying to get rid of this. So Kevin, I know I tasked you with seeing, is this going to be possible? Are we going to get rid of this or not? Because the American Trucking Association's executive director, Chris Spear, was talking about it at ATA MCE in October. So why don't you give us just a summary of what you found, and are we going to see this go away anytime soon, or what's happening?
Well, the quick and dirty is no, because it goes into the Highway Trust Fund, and it's almost on par now with diesel income from the Highway Trust Fund, and Congress has not raised the tax on gas and diesel since the Clinton administration, and without a way to replace that income, nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to touch it, despite the contradictory aspects of. ATA argues all the time, if we just replace the old trucks, that would be the biggest, most simple way to reduce emissions that we've got going. But because new trucks are expensive, while they are very, very efficient, people will keep driving their cheap, old, dirty trucks.
And that's also, Kevin, that's like the double-edged sword of it too, is because the fuel tax is not a percentage tax, it's a cent tax. So it's set at certain cents per gallon, and as trucks have become more efficient and they're actually getting more miles per gallon, they're actually contributing even less to the fuel tax. Same with automobiles in their side of the gas tax. As equipment becomes more efficient, you pay less tax. And as we see, no matter even if diesel goes up to $7 a gallon, that's not going to change how much money the government brings in to keep the roads up to date. Not to mention, electric vehicles are a lot heavier. They could put a little bit more wear and tear on the roads, and also they don't buy fuel, so they don't pay a fuel tax.
Yep, ATA has argued for years, we'll pay more diesel, we'll voluntarily pay a higher diesel tax. But you can't even get Congress to go along with somebody who says they want higher taxes if it goes into supporting the roads. So ATA had a whole list a year ago when we first started talking about the highway bill that's currently in the works now, and just came out and I think was passed by the House last week, or at least the Transportation Committee. They had a whole laundry list of things trucking wanted, and basically ATA got everything they wanted except FET relief. So it's I'm not optimistic about it. It did even on the trailer side. It's kind of fallen down their list of legislative priorities. They're more worried about tax breaks on inventory at this point, because it's been banging their heads against the wall for 10, 15, 20 years to try to get relief on this. It's complicated. It's hard to enforce. It's hard to understand. But anyway, that's just one of those things that's kind of on everybody's radar, but has gone nowhere forever. So people are basically losing interest. And it's guaranteed income that Congress says is great. Getting back to the hardware side, right now, Josh, we've been in a freight recession for this is the third year, whatever, and it's always been wait till the second half, wait till the second half. I mean, for literally the last 2 or 3 years, second half will be better, and it's never really gotten better. What are you seeing in terms of the markets, and how's that impacting all this fancy new great equipment but nobody can afford to buy?
Well, one thing is I think a lot of fleets and people in the industry thought when they saw the new wave of deregulation going on in Washington that would include EPA 27 regulations when it comes to HD engines. That didn't happen, probably in part because the manufacturers told the administration, look, we've invested billions of dollars into this collectively over the past years. We can't abandon all of these new models that we've been planning to unveil for 2027. But if you help cut out some of the warranties and useful life regulations that were part of it, that would help bring some of the cost down. And that has. But what ended up happening really is it delayed a lot of fleets into planning ahead because of this uncertainty that surrounded these regulations. So, 2 years ago, we were all writing a lot about the pre-buy and how it was going to match the similar pre-buy that happened earlier this century when new EPA regulations went in, and fleets wanted to get ahead of that more costly equipment. So they wanted to fill up those build slots to make sure they bought equipment before the deadline passed. We've been behind anyway, I think, as an industry. There were the supply chain woes out of COVID in getting parts ready, and then a lot of people just putting off buying, particularly on the for-hire side. The private fleet side really took up a lot of that market by investing more within their equipment to move goods for their own individual operations that weren't for hire. But on top of that, also to help cover their costs, they started picking up more backhauls and loads and actually riding the spot markets and eating into some of those smaller for hire carrier operations. So that has really hurt the for hire side. I saw Ken Veith, and we had a podcast interview with him. He's the president of ACT Research. We dropped that podcast a couple weeks ago after he spoke at the National Private Truck Council. And some of the information he had is that, the chaos since the pandemic era supply chain bottlenecks really led those private fleets to buy. They now represent about 55% of the market. It used to be more of a 50-50 split. And now the for-hire market's down to about 45%. And on top of that, too, because private fleets have traditionally invested a little bit more in their equipment, had more regular refreshes. Right now, there were, and this was 2 weeks ago, he said based on his firm's, kind of back of the envelope math, there's probably only 15 to 20,000 build slots left for 2026 equipment. He said this on Mother's Day weekend in May, and we're recording this now on June 2nd. So there's even less opportunities right now for fleets to plan ahead. And eventually we're going to get the firm details on that new equipment. And most of the OEs have already released their details on their new engines. They all say they're going to cost a little bit more, but no one's actually given the firm data on what they're going to cost because we're just waiting for the feds to finalize what those regulations are going to be. But it's like, just as maybe we're coming out of this recession, and who, like you said, Kevin, no one wants to say that anymore because we've been saying that for at least 2 years after the first year of this freight recession, which is now over 3 years old. So it's just like a planning nightmare right now, I think, for fleets as they're facing these price shocks and still kind of understanding the regulatory compliance costs. And then plus there's tariffs that have added to costs of equipment and slowed down some supply chains. So things are still a mess is the short summary of your question.
Well, and that, John and Lucas, that kind of brings up when fleets aren't buying new equipment, that means they're running their current equipment longer. That means they're now having to pay for maintenance that maybe the second or third owners used to have to pay for. On the shop side, what are you seeing? And all this fancy new equipment comes with all this new data. So right to repair is a big thing. Again, John, Lucas, right repair, AI, advanced diagnostics, what's going on in the shop?
Well, that's we could take those one by one, but as far as right to repair goes, less than 2 weeks ago there was a little bit of movement on this. Now, the Repair Act has been pushed through Congress, a couple times, sitting in the House committee that it's in, and the Commerce Committee. But there's another reauthorization bill that Congress was taking markups on, or the markup committee rather, a couple weeks ago, and they took parts of the Repair Act, which one of the sticking points for the aftermarket side is that the memorandum of understanding signed in 2014 for auto, and I believe 2015 for heavy duty, that the OEM signed, saying any of the repair data, service data, whatever that we give to our dealers, we'll make sure that the aftermarket repair shops and fleets have those as well. But that's just, a memorandum of understanding. So really no weight to it. So in this new provision, they added that, and it was voted ahead by the committee. So then, I guess it has to be voted, by Congress and whatever to approve it. But part of the Repair Act could be kind of going through. Now, the proponents of the Repair Act, Dr. Neil Dunn, a representative out of Florida, he spoke at that markup, and he was pretty upset that they were kind of only taking little chunks of it, trying to fit that through, because the main sticking point for them has to do with the telematics and the data. The argument is that the OEMs, any of your, as you're driving, your consumer or fleet or whatever, all of that location data, where you stopped, what your engine was doing, how fast you were going, whatever it is, the OEM owns that data and isn't letting it go. The aftermarket proponents essentially contend that they are monopolizing this data, and they're going to be selling it to insurance companies and retailers and whatever. Hey, Starbucks, you want to open up at the corner here? We can sell you this traffic data. This is how many cars go through based on our telematics. Or the big fear is with the insurance companies. Hey, we could say how fast people are going and how often they speed. And, there could be a future in their minds where, the speed limit's 35 and you go 41 and you get in an accident or something, and they know that they can, penalize you for that somehow. So that is not anything anyone's specifically working on, but, it's the slippery slope. And, both sides are trying to make their case. So there's a bit of fear mongering going on. But
so if you thought that dash cams were Big Brother, this sounds like Big Brother 2.0.
Exactly. But that's why it's just the two sides fighting over this, and I don't think that fight's going to be resolved anytime soon. The Repair Act still in Congress and not having any movement. uh, isn't good for it. So, my guess is they're going to have the fourth or fifth try of the Repair Act next Congress, and then the next one after. And, there's just, nothing's going to happen with it. I'm kind of cynical about it after researching it for, several years now.
Well, yeah. Well, let's be clear on this, though. I mean, the people that are hurt are the independent shops that either have to pay a lot of money to get the diagnostic tools they need, or they have to send it down the street when it gets to a point they can't fix it anymore. But I can certainly understand why the OEMs say, look, we've invested a whole lot of money in developing this technology. We understand it. We don't want a mom and pop shop down the street tinkering with this really complex equipment.
And that's a fair point, but there is also, and they're saying, a lot of the independent shops are saying we don't have access to this, and we can get, and a lot of this has to do with the security firewalls. So if you have your start stop, you don't want someone being able to start your car, hacker kind of Fast and the Furious nonsense and whatever. So they have all these firewalls. Well, to get through those, you need certain codes and all of that technical stuff. But when you're just trying to do certain repairs, you might have to get through that. So then that's a bottleneck for them. And they argue that, some have said like shops might have to do a couple a month where this happens. So I don't know, if you have, hundreds and hundreds of repairs a month, and like one or two of them or whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Plus there is and I don't want to sound like an OEM shill right now, but I do have to kind of make their case for them a little bit. But there's a way through the NASTF. It's escaped me what the whole thing stands for. But basically, you can go to this nonprofit site, and they will work with the OEM. So whatever the code and whatever the problem is, to my understanding, you pay like $100 or $150 or whatever as the independent, and then they'll get with the OEM technician, and they'll help you clear it, and for a small fee. And that's not really, to me, any different than if you're a shop and you can't do a heavy duty alignment, so you have a partner down the street that you just send the stuff to. I mean, small shops can't have every single tool. It's just not financially feasible to be able to do everything, even at an all makes place.
Yeah, well, and as we're running up on an hour, John or Lucas, real quickly, we talk a lot at FleetOwner about driver recruitment and retention. Shops maybe don't get that level of concern among the trucking companies. What are you seeing in terms of technicians training the next generation?
Yeah. I mean, a lot that we talk about shop specific is that it comes down to culture. Technicians are looking for more than just good pay and good hours. They want to feel like they're cared for and they're respected within the shop. They want opportunities for growth. They want opportunities to feel like they have the opportunity to make a difference in the shop and learn from their higher ups. I think that's another thing that we touch on a lot is mentoring and shadowing. Opportunities for advanced training where these older guys and girls that are leaving the industry with a lot of important knowledge are able to pass that down. So I think techs are looking for a wide variety of things that goes beyond what many shops might think that their offering is enough.
All right. Along those lines, Jade, whether it's in the shop or behind the wheel or in the executive suite, you do a lot of work with women in trucking, women in transportation. Anything in particular you want to touch on before we run out of time here?
I will say that I have been keeping it with technicians. I did go to an event a couple of years ago. I can't imagine things have changed much since then. But one thing that was mentioned was that it's very difficult to find techs these days because techs want to work with their hands. They don't want to work with a laptop. But we are in the industry shifting toward laptop everything. So I think that also is going to, if you want to bring more techs in, I think you're going to have to sell it in a different way if they will be working with a laptop the majority of the time. This came from someone who owned several dealerships in the heavy duty trucking space, actually. So it doesn't necessarily fit every category, but it is, for our readers, a big topic.
All right, very good. Well, before we sign off, of course, we've got July 4th, and lots of people, lots of companies have big plans, and maybe we do too. Who wants to say what your plans are, or what has impressed you with somebody else's 250th anniversary plans? Who wants to go first? Jade, since you just spoke and you're on screen.
I don't know. I just love hot dogs and fireworks.
Okay. Lucas, any big plans, or have you seen something that somebody that you're covering is doing that you really think is impressive?
Yeah, I mean, my birthday is actually on July 4th, so I've kind of grown up celebrating alongside the country. I've always joked that the fireworks and hot dogs were just for me, but I think working on this America 250 has made me appreciate the history behind the celebration quite a bit more. And my plan personally is to find a body of water and someone that owns a boat, I think.
If only you knew someone.
Yeah, right?
If only
Excellent.
if only someone on this call had a boat and lived near water.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm on my way.
And in the
Moving-
Carolinas, so.
moving along, John, what strikes you?
Well, yeah, for 4th of July, probably going to do the usual cookout and fireworks, but I did want to say one thing I learned about the birth of the American cookout. Actually has to do with Henry Ford. Now, the Model Ts, you had a 250, board feet of wood for each Model T. So he had a cousin by marriage, has a timber mill or plant up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They get into business, start, getting all this lumber going. Henry Ford, father of lean manufacturing and all that, notices all this leftover sawdust. So they decide, let's turn this sawdust into charcoal briquettes, the very first uniform briquettes. Now, his cousin's name was Edward Kingsford. So you could kind of see where we're going with this, but in the interim, Ford would sell the charcoal at their Ford stores, and then one of their employees was loved the outdoors and said, hey, why don't you kind of package this up in these picnic sets or whatever, and that kind of not only creates the barbecue and the cookout kind of thing, but the modern American road trip where you just kind of get your stuff and you drive off somewhere. So just as you're grilling your burgers and dogs and all of that, just remember, if you're using charcoal, the Model T and Henry Ford is pretty much directly responsible for that. I use propane, so I won't be thinking of that. But
You're just a walking connections episode of your own, John. I appreciate that. But also, speaking of appreciating, John, thank you for your service in the U.S. Navy. And for those who subscribe to Fleet Maintenance Magazine, do have a look at John's introductory note, which he discusses maybe he had made a poor decision and didn't really understand what America was about. It's just he's got an amusing tale of a hurricane drill in the U.S. Navy. So be sure to read John's note. Josh, we'll let you wrap it up.
Thanks, Kevin. I first off, I just want to say that we're living in this time of uncertainty and things are changing. But the grit that has defined this industry that we're all lucky enough to cover, that hasn't changed. A lot more stuff is happening, virtually and under the hood and inside the cab that would take, more hours and brain power to explain. But it's all being done with the hope to make us more efficient and to get goods and people to their places faster and safer. And I think that is what's important in all this, and added to all this uncertainty that we have right now, whether it be regulations, fuel costs, and tariffs and all those other things, is that this is just yet another opportunity for like American capitalism to win out, and for the best to actually not only survive but to flourish in uncertain times. And that's like what makes me hopeful, not only for the rest of this year but for the future of trucking and for America. And as part, my original plans for the July 4th week were certainly ruined when my favorite childhood rapper of the 1980s, Young MC, pulled out of the Freedom 250 concert on the Mall. So I'm seeing if I can unload my tickets to that somehow. But otherwise, I will be using some briquettes, Kingsford, in honor of John Hitch, to cook out, probably making, we'll do some barbecue and some ribs. We're fortunate enough here where I live where we see the city's firework display right from our back garden. So that's how I look forward to celebrating with or without Young MC.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you all very much. We will have links to all our magazines and stories and all this good stuff we've talked about today on the page that we have our podcasts on. So thanks everybody, and happy 4th of July.